Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's school committee meeting. Alex, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. We have a consent agenda, the minutes from September 29th, 2016, and oath to bills and payroll.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as read.
Second. Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? I'm going to abstain from this vote because I was not at that meeting, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? All right, 3-0. Interested citizens? Okay. Student representative report. Olivia, how are you?
I'm good.
Excellent, thank you for coming.
So the 7th grade is finishing their archaeology dig. That's how you say words. For the high school, we have our homecoming football game this Friday. We have our pep rally tomorrow as well. We have our homecoming dance on the 22nd. And the sophomores and juniors, like me, get to take the PSATs Saturday morning. Then we all have an early release next Wednesday.
Good, thank you. All right, the next item, well, actually, do we have any other recognition? Superintendent Clutch?
Just one other one. I wanted to congratulate the varsity golf team for taking the league title. They finished first just the other day, so quite an accomplishment. And again, all of our teams are, again, doing very well this fall season. And as Olivia pointed out, we have a home game tomorrow night, so I hope we have a good crowd. I think the weather will be good until 1 in the morning. That's when we're going to get frost, so it should be okay.
All right.
That's it.
Thank you. We are going to talk about the ice hockey surcharge, but Mike Lynn's not here yet, so Dr. Waiting in the wings. All right, so we will talk about the ice hockey surcharge.
This is the first, you guys are 10 minutes ahead of scheduling.
Don't change that.
We'll have to get some back.
Or don't challenge us, I'm not sure which way you want.
So you have a new configuration in here, is this?
Yeah.
Okay. So as we went through this process last year, basically, this is just plugging in the numbers for this year. And as far as, we said last year that we would look at this each fall once we have the relevant data available. Howie Schneider is in the back row here, has held a sign-up meeting which yielded 37 prospective players at this point. As you can see from the chart there, the rate per hour at the Groton School is still $210 per hour. We have 77 total ice hours booked at a cost of $16,170, and divided by 37 comes out to $437. Last year's number was $380. We plugged into that same chart.
Mike, can you, so for total ice hours, 77, how firm a number is that?
We feel,
So that's sort of a variable. The ice is actually a little bit higher now,
Okay.
but I'm still working on the final JV schedule. Hockey's different because the coaches schedule the JV games, which is kind of weird, but we do that. And so when I do that, I'm going to have conflicts. So at this point, I'm planning on giving back 4 hours, which brings us to 77.
Okay.
Okay. We then generally lose 1 to 4 to 5. Like last year, we lost 1. The year before, we lost 7 sheets of ice because the year before was that stupid snowstorm. So it takes really, and that's what I was gonna say, it takes 75 to 80 hours to run a JV and varsity program.
Okay.
Whether you have 28 kids or you have 40 kids.
Right.
Okay? And so the variable really is the number of kids. Groton may raise their price next year, they may not. You know, if that price goes up, I think the price should certainly, we should look at our price. But So we dropped from 42 kids to 37. That number's not firm either. That could go up by 1 or 2, could go down by 1 or 2. We won't know that till Monday after Thanksgiving. Okay, so the only reason I wanted to come was just talk a little bit about it, that, and being the hockey coach, but also I had kids on the team. I've been a parent here. I've been coach for 14 years. It's a big variable expense for the parents to 1 year pay $380 and the next year $437. If for some reason the program dropped to 30, which it could do in 3 or 4 years, I don't have that crystal ball, you know, and then all of a sudden the surcharge is $537 plus the $200. So I don't have a perfect solution to this. I just wanted to make you guys aware that if I was a parent, I'd rather know that it's going to be this as opposed to a variable. And again, that it varies during the season. We could end up with 33 kids on the roster, and I could end up with 40, depending on how tryouts go. Kids who don't make varsity may quit. All of a sudden, a kid who I thought wasn't playing comes back. I had a call the other day from a kid who didn't play last year, who's playing. But I think another kid is leaving. That's why I didn't change the number to 37. So, you know, it's a juggling act. So, I mean, what I would like to see going forward, and Mike and I talked a little bit about this, I know we said it last year, I'm not looking to get rid of the surcharge, would be almost to take a fixed number, that this is what it is. If the Groton ice goes up, then you look at raising the price, but to make it variable on the number of kids. And in terms of ice, it's really a 75 to 80 hour process. Can we cut it back? We could, but I think parents would rather have the ice and have your kids have it. Mike, you've been there.
I don't think that's a good idea, that we should be thinking about controlling costs by reducing the amount of play that the kids get. That's not what this is designed to do.
So we're really looking at 380 last year, because we had a lot of kids last year, to potentially 537 based on the current cost.
437, yeah.
If it drops to 30 kids.
Yeah.
So, and it may not. So that's what it, so if I'm a parent, I would rather know more or less. And, you know, this gives them a month, and last year some parents griped a little bit about being closed. I don't have an issue with a surcharge. Every other program does it, and you have to cover the cost now. So I just, and I'm not asking you guys to change anything. I wanted to feel good that you guys knew everything that goes into the program, and that it's not a fixed, you know, it's not as fixed as basketball. You're probably limited to 24 kids. We'll carry 40 kids.
Right. All right. And just for historical perspective, before we did the surcharge, the ice time was covered in our athletic budget, right? And I realized that it was a different thing, because we had a situation where we had a very good quid pro quo type relationship with the Groton schools, so we weren't getting charged the full freight. So it was a much smaller number that we had to cover, and the number's gone up. But we did cover some number year by year, right?
Correct. For many, many years, they kept our number at like the $11,000 range, even though we were getting more ice than that.
Okay.
There was a shift in the head of school over there, and when the new head of school came in, he was less willing to give public schools, bonus ice, and they kind of tightened down on that whole process on the ice, and they tightened down on your time to cancel, and it was a whole package as far as how they manage the ice.
But there's other costs as well in the program that have increased. I mean, the cost of referees has increased, the cost of transportation has increased, so just to balance it all.
Yeah, but on the
That's
other
across
hand-
all sports.
Right,
Correct.
and we are charging the user fee on top of this, so ostensibly the user fee should be covering or subsidizing to the level that we're comfortable with as a school committee, the amounts for officials, coaches, equipment, transportation, so.
The surcharge is just for the ice.
Just for the ice.
Right.
And so what happened was, we went from a situation where the budget was covering $11,000, there was no surcharge, which was an anomaly in the sense that, as Mike and Howie said, probably every, right, high school hockey program has a surcharge for ice, because they don't have their own facilities, they have to rent them, and it's probably not fair to ask all the other athletes and the budget to subsidize this kind of thing, because the other sports don't have that same requirement. So we went from 0 to covering around, $16,000. Well, the budget was covering 11,000. We took that out and asked the families to cover 16,000, which again, in my mind anyway, is comparable to what the experience would be in any other community that they were playing high school hockey in. So I'm okay with that. However, I'm taking under strong consideration some of the comments that Howie's made about, the variability year by year because of the number of participants. It sounds like the number of hours is pretty solid, plus or minus. It's within a range where I wouldn't say, well, we're going to tweak that, because it's not going to go down by 10 or 15%, or up by 10 or 15%. It's right where, roughly where it should be. If it goes up a couple hours or down a couple hours, that's not really material to the budget. But the number of participants is material and highly variable year by year. We're talking about going, what was it, 380 last year?
380 last year.
So that's a $50 increase. That's significant. So I'm thinking about, personally, like, for the purposes of planning and fairness, to think about what the right number is and just leave it there until we have to reevaluate it, because either the the hourly rate of the ice goes up, or we see a significant change, plus or minus, in the number of kids participating. We don't want to be running at a surplus, so if all of a sudden we've got 60 kids and we're charging them whatever number and we're running at a surplus, we would certainly adjust it. But I also don't want to see, we can't afford to be running at a deficit, because that's the whole idea of having the surcharge, is to not, carry this on the overall budget. But I don't necessarily like the idea of going year by year and having them cover it all, because it can be extremely variable and it's a fairly large number.
So in the last 5 years, have you had less than 37 participants?
Yeah, so I stepped down for a year to watch my son play, and then the first 2 years back, we were in the low 20s. Okay, that was a huge anomaly. Since then, we've been at, I should have brought the numbers tonight because I have them. Last year, we jumped up to about 40. But the years before that, we were like at 33, 35. I would say a good number is between 30 and 36 is where the program looks solid. I can look into
Historically, that's where we've been.
It's where we've been.
Yeah.
Traditionally, we've been there every year except those 2 years. And I'm looking at the Neshoba program and the AB program, looking at the number of 8th graders and 7th graders and 6th graders, and that's what it looks like. I thought we were going to have more kids this year, but 3 or 4 kids decided not to play hockey for whatever reasons. And I'm 100% sure it's not the surcharge.
To touch upon some points that Mike made, I didn't put as much on this document as last year, obviously, but I surveyed all of the adjacent communities, some of the ones, Westford and Acton and Lunenburg and some other programs that we play or are just adjacent to, and essentially every school system seems to do some kind of model similar to this.
If I remember correctly, they tended to be more expensive than our rates.
Yeah, I think
If not this year, because we have a $50 or so increase.
comparable,
but
or
last
some
year-
of them were more, yes.
Last year, I thought the number we looked at was pretty good relative to where other communities were. Given none of us want to be charging kids for any extracurriculars, but given the realities of the situation, I thought we came off pretty well. My thought would be, given that we don't want to adjust this, should a kid drop or should you get another kid, keeping a rate, setting the rate every fall, at least for the next couple of years, because it sounds like there might be some volatility, especially if you have those new kids coming in who brought those numbers up from 20, when those leave, when those kids leave the system.
No, we look pretty good for the next 3 or 4 years, what I could see
Okay.
into. That will be between, I would say, 32 and 36.
Okay.
We actually bought more jerseys because I thought it was going to be bigger, but with 2 or 3 kids not playing, 35, 36, 37 looks like where we're going to be at.
Okay. And that would
But again, it's,
frankly be the better direction to be going, is if we added more. I mean, if we're talking about, we'd rather lower a fee than raise a fee.
and I do want to make one point, Mike. We talked about this last year. A lot of the programs are dropping numbers. We've been rising the last few years, and it looks like we're real steady. So we're really in solid grounds right now, which is really nice.
That number is actually a desirable number for an ice hockey program like ours. That's a manageable with varsity, and the JV program isn't quite like say a JV soccer team where it just parallels the varsity program. It is different. They play on Sunday mornings typically, so it's a modified JV program. So that number there, what do you carry, about 22 kids on varsity? 18 to 22, let's say.
Yeah, we may not carry them all on varsity. We'll dress 20 at a game.
Right. So,
Just before we go ahead, I'll let you go with 1 second, Mike. I just want to throw a number out there. So if we think that the ice time roughly every year is $16,000 and we average 35 kids a year, that would be a $457 for them to cover the whole thing. So just throwing that out there just to think about. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I do think it makes sense to Howie's point about providing some consistency for parents. That I mean, I don't think it's that bad of a thing if the school system picks up. If we're used to picking up $11,000, I don't think it's the end of the world if we pick up a small percentage of that based on the inconsistency and the moving parts there. So I'd be totally comfortable either setting a fee for 2 years from now or even 4 years from now and erring on the side of having fewer kids playing and the school picking up a couple $1,000s in the tab rather than overcharging. Or, and to Howie's point, if you're a parent with a couple kids, that could be a big swing for the annual cost. So I'm not opposed to doing a 2-year fee setting, or maybe we set it in the fall for the following year. Maybe at this time we should be setting it for next year rather than this current season that's coming up. I think it makes sense to do the numbers that Mike's calculating, which is to come up with sort of an average, predictable average.
How do you know that's what I'm doing? I'm trying to figure out how much I owe my bookie.
I'm overlooking your shoulder.
I think in terms of trying to, you do have some variability, but I think, if we're historically between 30 and 36, if we pick a number, 35, and use that, I mean, I think that's a good, might as well, it is a little different than the other sports in terms of how many you carry, but I think that, I'm comfortable with that. And then, I mean, we could always, if we over-collected, we could just rebate the money back.
Yeah.
To the parents, because it is an additional fee.
Yep.
Type of thing there, and then if we do get a little bit of variability, we can have a discussion as to whether the athletic budget picks up that variation or not. But I get concerned when you talked about some of the out years and it dipping below 30, and it brings up, is it a viable team as we get lower and lower numbers there, of which the costs are just going to be exorbitant.
Viable relative to cost. I mean, it would be viable to have a program with 25 kids in it. As a matter of fact, you might reduce the JV schedule or something and it would become a varsity-only type thing. But you're right, at that point, as a school district, we got to think about, does it become viable from a financial point of view, just because of the different aspect of it that we don't have to.
And what we did when we dropped those numbers, we did drop the JV program, we dropped all the Sunday ice. Our ice didn't go down in half, it didn't.
Right.
But it went down probably a third.
Right. So, we can, at that point, we
That's what I
can.
mean, we got to
Right.
look at it closely.
Right.
Does the district spend approximately the same amount of money on the hockey programs, not including the ice time, as it does with other programs? Because there's still costs included with the basketball team. You're still cleaning up the gymnasium. Football team obviously has huge costs with maintaining the fields and things like that. Is it approximate?
So-
Or are we now spending less on the hockey team than we did when we took the ice time off?
No,
Yeah.
no, hockey, well, when you take the ice off, it becomes comparable to most sports, like, we're paying for the same things. We're paying for 2 coaches,
Yeah.
paying for transportation and officials. Those are your major cost centers. Uniforms every 5 years, and last time we did uniforms for hockey, we actually funded the uniforms through the booster program, but we bought very, very high-quality uniforms that we plan to get a long time out of. So really, the costs are
Officials, transportation,
and coaches. And this was the major extraneous cost. Now, 2 costs a cost and a revenue you have with hockey. There's only 2 sports that we hire police details for. That's football games, and we are mandated to have 1 detail at every varsity hockey game. Groton Groton Police Department was $201.60 per detail. So times 10 hockey games, that was a little over $2,000. We do charge people to get into the game. Last year, we collected $2,084. So the ticket sales erase the cost, so it's neutral there. We used to draw huge crowds at hockey a number of years ago. Back in-
When I was playing.
Right, you were playing. So,
Star quality.
When I was not playing, sorry, I should have said.
we're not really, we're not really sure why.
Yeah, I was present.
We're not really sure why it diminished, but it did. But we used to collect a lot more ticket sales revenue. But in recent years, that 2,084 is a pretty safe number to say we're probably going to be in that range unless we see a spike in student interest again and community members. It was just, it had that allure at one point, and now we still get a good crowd there, but, once people all have their season passes and whatnot, we're only charging the visiting team really because we do the winter season pass. So yes, the detail and ticket sales wash each other out. So then you're looking at those three costs that we talked about that
Which are consistent.
soccer, any sport has.
Yeah, there's one other thing, and the crowds are getting better. Like 3 or 4 years ago, they were terrible, but last year they were better.
Yep.
It's been consistent. The other thing you do when you get 35 hockey players, you also get the $200 user fee, which is more than 24 basketball players, or I don't know how many soccer players. So, and again, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to get rid of the user fee. I'm just, I hear this stuff from the parents, okay, and I'm just really trying to pass it on. If we went with 437, I could sell it. Be very little pushback on whatever. But if next year all of a sudden went to 480 and then it dropped to 410, it's just, if I was a parent, I'd want the consistency. But again, whatever we decide here tonight, I'm going to support, and I'm going to support it with the hockey program. So
Let's gonna throw another calculation out there. If we charged $425 and we averaged 35 players, we'd have $14,875, which leaves a difference of $1,125. So 437 would cover, for this year at 37, would cover the whole nut. 35 players, if that was the average for $16,000, is $457. So to me, that's kind of the range we're thinking about. 425 is an increase from last year, but it's not covering all the ice time, but a jump to 457, which is even more than what these guys are projecting or asking for. That's kind of where we are.
So I know Kelly's got.
Sorry.
Does the 77 hours, does that just cover the regular season? Or are
Yes.
there playoffs?
there's one sheet in the playoffs that I haven't turned back.
So it would be helpful to even take last year, how many hours beyond the 77 did you go?
How many practice sheets do we have? The tournament game doesn't count because the MIA pays for the entire. How many sheets did we have leading
So
up
the
to
season
that?
ends on Friday, we usually end up playing Wednesday or Thursday, so it's 3 to 4 sheets.
Yeah, so we got a few additional sheets on top of it.
But again, I'm of a mind in that aspect that we'll cover that. As a school district, let's take care of the kids that do well. That shouldn't be something that the parents should be worrying about, telling their kid to take a dive so they don't have to in the last game, so they don't.
Fundraise next year.
I think that's where I was going to come from. I think us supporting the additional games, whether it's for football or for hockey or, for the championship series, I think we ought to try to plan that out of the fees that we collect with the school budget there. So Mike, I guess my only concern on part of your proposal there is...
It wasn't a proposal, it was just...
Just an observation of calculation. Is if we plan, how many times we want to plan for the district to cover the shortages. And like I said, I'm very comfortable of the district covering the championship games and the additional ice time for that. But if we then also want to cover parts of the regular season ice time, is how many times do we dip in for that variability out of our budget also in terms of what we're using the user fees for, and you know, and then what kind of reserves we need to have to cover those variations.
We're
I just don't
typically-
know how close we're running, you know, on things there, because we shouldn't try to do the whole budget in real time
Right.
here tonight.
We're running pretty close, aren't we, Steve?
I mean,
So,
one option would be to say that it would be, that the annual surcharge will range from $425, but will not be more than $450, and maybe that way, consistency, parents can budget for $450, and at, you know, the Monday after Thanksgiving, we may realize we only need $435 from each player. We could set an anticipated cap on the surcharge.
Do we need to then approve that fixed
I
rate
would suggest we
after-
do not. I would suggest that we then leave it up to the
Provided that it's within that
officials
range and
to,
follows that formula.
yeah, and we've got a range, it won't be more than 450, but we anticipate between 425 and 450.
That would make sense.
And then we can leave it up to you all to set the final fee.
are you guys comfortable with that? I'm looking at my business manager and my athletic director. I'm comfortable with affording you guys the discretion to do right by the district and the athletes personally. If I had to hire somebody else, I might have to reevaluate it, but.
Or it doesn't hurt, I mean, I guess if you felt more comfortable
So
coming back.
what were the numbers you threw out, Mike?
425.
I mean, you could either say a range between 425 and 450, or you could just say the surcharge will not be, you know, could be up to $450. You should anticipate up to $450, but it may be less depending on
Personally, I
circumstances.
I think the range of 425 to 450 is about right. And then if we see a huge increase or decrease in the level of participation or an increase in the cost per hour, then I would ask you guys to come back to us and we will revisit that. But as long as that you guys are operating under those parameters of $210 an hour around 35 kids, you have the wherewithal to make a decision between 425 and 450. That's going to get you between roughly $15,000 and you know, $16,000 something dollars.
Yeah, I think if we did this for a couple of years and tracked it, so we could see what the average is, I think that would be fair and acceptable.
Thoughts?
Well, I can go back for the last 14 years and tell you how much we paid for ice and.
Yeah,
I don't know how the future
That's
is
not
going to
gonna
go.
address, I
It
guess,
changed
the
a couple of
underlying
years ago.
concern, though, is you gave the potential of a 537 number or a $500 number, depending on it.
You're down to like 30 kids.
Right. So that's what, it's a little conflict in terms of what kind of guidance are we trying to provide.
Well,
Is
that-
I get uncomfortable trying to commit that we would subsidize at 450 if the ice time went to 500.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
That's what I mean.
I'm
I'm not
saying-
sure what you're.
I'm only saying that the way I'm thinking about it is the range of 425 to 450 is valid as long as it's $16,000 and around 35 kids. If either one of those two variables or both change, then they got to come back to us and we'll straighten it out, one way or the other. That's what I'm thinking. Hopefully, they're both gonna stay right there, and then we won't have to worry about this year by year. Families can plan, the athletic director can plan, you know, the business manager might see a small exposure of a couple $1,000 depending on what happened, but, you know, we're probably okay with that. I don't know. That's what I'm thinking.
I'm trying to figure out how that would turn into a motion for direction.
Before we,
I'm not sure how much weight it carries. My preference would be that we come out of here tonight with a number.
We will come out of here with a number.
Okay, so we're not gonna come out of here and let people know that it could be this or it could be this.
No, because what's gonna happen, well, here's what's gonna happen. If we do this, you have your number. It's been, 437 is between
Right.
420. And if you say to you and Howie get together and say, let's just make it 430, or let's make it 435.
Well, I'm not
or-
comfortable, I'd rather have this committee make the decision.
Well, that's what I'm trying to ask you. Are you comfortable dealing with a range and having the discretion, or do you want us to vote it every year?
I do not want to open myself up. I have
Okay,
enough
so then the range
headaches
thing
as
won't
it is,
work.
and I don't really
Okay,
want to
that's
take
fine.
that on.
I have no problem, personally, I have no problem with that. So forget the range.
We can
thing.
still maybe give some guidance to the coaches that they can, when parents ask you how much is going to be next year, you can say, we don't know for certain, but we expect it
So
won't be more than
I
450.
guess-
Well, I like the idea of not having a number that will be exceeded.
Yeah,
It sounds
exactly.
like
We
that
can
number
say,
might be 450 right now.
right, we can say, we expect it won't be more
We're
than
in
that.
that range right now.
I would, I guess, ask that if next year's estimate is going to exceed 450, that you come to us earlier before you notify the parents of what the cost was, so that we can have a discussion in time to see whether there's budget room available or what the situation is there. Because, I guess, because you'll know the cost the rate per hour sooner than you'll know the number of students, right? So you'll know in advance whether the ice time base cost is going to go up.
Yes.
$230 an hour instead of $210 an hour.
Yeah, they've been at 210 now for, they were at 195 and it went to 210. And I think we're on, was this like the third year at 210, I want to say? Somewhere in that range, right?
Third or fourth year, yeah.
Believe it or not, 210 is a bargain in the world of ice hockey. The place in Marlboro there, they're approaching $300 per hour, unless you want the 5 in the morning sheets. So that's just an addendum to this, that the Groton School is still being treating us incredibly well, and we're very thankful for that relationship, because it's an amazing facility, obviously, too.
So, I can't make a motion as the chair, at least I don't think I can. I'm a little uncomfortable going all the way to 437 from 380 last year. I would be more supportive of around $425, which is, it would, at 37 players, would be,
While he's doing his math, have you guys had any conversations? The rumor has it that the Point is going to have an ice hockey rink. Have you talked about having practice?
Learned that today. It's going to be an outdoor ice hockey rink.
Yeah.
So, and I was also told today that it was going to be somewhere in the like the $100 to $110 range per hour. So we don't know. I literally don't know anything about that, other than
More than that,
Mike
yeah.
Corey told me about it today. He learned about it from somewhere else. So, yeah, I guess hearsay
I
says
mean,
there's going to be
obviously
something
you wouldn't
up
play
there.
games there, but maybe if you had a practice every once
Yeah,
in a
Winter
while.
Classic game. It could be a big draw.
Yeah, just a
But
thought.
is it going to be a full rink?
I've been told that it's going to be a full hockey
Outdoor
site.
With
rink.
Zamboni and everything.
Practice out.
sorry,
Yeah,
let's
that's
finish this up. Let's finish this up.
I might have just saved us some money.
So I guess, the only part I have the reservation about the 425 is doing the real-time budgeting here. I'd be comfortable asking the administration to go back and give us an assessment as to whether 425 is workable in the budget they have available.
Okay, so you're talking not from the hockey team's perspective of worrying whether or not they're going to have exactly 37. You're asking the
If we're
business
going to ask
manager
the
to think
business
about
manager to
covering.
absorb,
What is it, $1,000?
Well, the thing is
I don't know how much.
well, it's at if it's 425.
It's not going to make a huge, it shouldn't.
425, I think is
445.
425 times 37 players, $15,725, $75.
$600.
It's $275.
Okay, maybe I didn't do all the math.
Yeah.
Because I thought you threw out $1,000, a
No,
$900.
that's if I was going with 35.
Okay.
If we only had 35.
That's
then
why
it
I
would
was
be-
just not comfortable doing the real-time budgeting with not knowing what
Well, the
numbers
problem
were.
is, but that's the problem with waiting to see exactly how many players we have.
No,
That's-
I was comfortable going with
Okay.
the estimated number of players in
Okay.
30, in the 425.
Okay.
If we are sure that we are not going to mess up somebody's, that we've got, I don't know, I guess you did the math and said it's only $400.
It's not even, it's 200. With 37 players, at $425, the projected deficit would be $275.
I'm just a little concerned about putting our administration on to answer that question in real time without making sure that they.
If it was
I
around
want to be careful about the
$2,000,
precedent we're setting
I
there.
agree with you. If we were asking them to cover a $2,000 potential deficit, I would give them the benefit of going back to look at it. But I personally think around a few $100s, we're okay.
The money we
Comfortable with that?
have other students that are coming into our district. I mean, we're not
And then-
recognized any of this in our corporate budget.
And the other variable in that is the exposure of how solid the 37
Right.
is.
But that one, we're gonna have to live with that,
How early in the school year do you get that number? Obviously, it's not a hard number until the season starts.
Exactly.
Maybe not even until the.
Well, I mean, they just had their meeting, right?
No, I haven't, I actually haven't. The count I got is from fundraisers that we've done in September. Our official meeting's not till November 2nd. I'm allowed one.
And again, even that, you know, I think how.
I don't think other school
Yeah.
committees are voting the night before the first game on what the
No,
surcharge
but I
is.
think Alex's point is like, let's get it even earlier, but the problem is we can't. I mean, I think, we're in Littleton.
Yeah.
Every coach knomes within 2 or 3
That's what I'm saying.
who's showing up.
That's what I'm
You
saying.
know what I mean? It's Littleton.
And keep in mind, hockey, the kid who plays hockey, for the most part, has been playing for a real long time, and the family spent a lot of money, and they typically don't stop playing at the high school. If I was trying to do this for outdoor track, you have kids making their mind up 2 days before the season, the day of
2
the
days
season.
into the season.
They go out for it, they say, this wasn't what I was expecting, I'm out of here, and hockey's a little different. If we say it's 37, boy, these kids have been pretty committed to the sport of ice hockey. It's probably going to be right, whether it's 36, 35, 38, 39, it's going to be in that neighborhood.
And then also on that same vein, if, for most high school students, they're going to be playing hockey for 4 years, so I don't think it's the end of the world if they overpaid $5 one year, because it's going to come back to them the next year until they graduate, but I don't think it's the end of the world to overestimate by $5 or $10 either, so I think we're right in that target range. I don't think we need to try and get any more granular with
This
this.
is a better than an educated guess, but
Yeah.
it is an estimation exercise. There's no way to pinpoint it until the day of the first day of the winter season.
Even that.
And then even then, when Howie says, here's the full-time varsity roster, we've had kids say, well, I'm not sticking around because I don't like my role. So all these things can happen. That's why I think we have to set this number, give people advance notice, because that was some of the feedback we heard even though we did this actually earlier last year, because it was the first year, we did get that feedback, but anytime you institute a new fee, nobody's going to be happy. There's certainly going to be people unhappy.
Just to give you an idea, for our athletic program budget closeout this year, we subsidized the program by $5,000. So, and in previous years, it's been less than that.
All right, I think we've talked this thing through very well. Are we ready for a motion?
I'm happy to make a motion to the stuff that I anticipate we're going to vote on, which is $425 fee for this year. I don't know that I have consensus on how we want to handle next year. Do we want to just verbally make a goal that we won't have a goal above 450, that they can be relayed to parents? or-
At this point, I think we've had a robust discussion, and anybody who's paying attention, I think, senses the...
It'll be in that range.
Right, the spirit of the committee is that we're trying to be fair, and that we're not gonna, we're gonna bend over backwards to not, go crazy here. But, given what we've talked about, I think we need to, this is only the second year we've done this, I think we should just vote it this year, and then we'll look at it again next year with, the input you guys gave us was great relative to helping family, us understand what the families are trying to deal with as they process this, and we'll be cognizant of that.
All right, so I'll make a motion to set the 2016-2017 ice hockey surcharge at $425 per player.
All right, motion made in a second. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Thank you. All right, thanks, guys. Yep.
Can I ask the committee just for approval, I think, on something relatively simple? Okay? This has nothing to do with ice hockey. This has to do with, we've had some interest in our students with downhill skiing as a sport. It's an MIA sport. So I started looking for a co-op. There is a school that is in the market for a co-op. There's two, actually, Groton Dunstable and Lunenburg, both in our league, both ski out in the Neshoba Valley. I was working with Groton Dunstable initially, but it looks like Lunenburg's in a more favorable situation because they will probably lose their program if they don't get a handful of students. We have 4 boys in the high school and 2 girls who would like to participate in this. And again, I know budget is the most critical issue here. This is budget neutral, budget non-existent, because they would pay a fee to Lunenburg, whatever Lunenburg decides, if we were to go forward with this. The only piece that could impact the budget, and keep in mind, we keep talking about 6 kids, we have always, with our kids who are guests in a co-op, because I get hit with this every year, because if a girl goes to play ice hockey for Western Academy and plays $500-something, they then, a lot of times those families are like, well, I'm done paying, so spring is free. And what we have done is said, we will credit you $200 to your family max, but we will not credit you 500 and some odd dollars, just like we don't credit the surcharge here towards the, so the only way this could impact the budget is if a kid skis and then a kid plays a spring sport, this skiing could credit them towards their family max, because we credit them the 200 towards that they would have paid had they done indoor track and
But we do that for everybody. Anybody that
We've done
co-ops,
that
yeah.
for all the years we've had swimming and.
What is for the fee for downhill racing, is it just whatever the school charges for any sport? Are there any additional fees? Do they have to rent?
Lunenburg is one of the schools with their ice hockey, they do something similar to what we just talked about.
What about their ski team? Do they have
The
to?
skiing, they have a special structure for it,
Okay.
and I believe how they do it is they charge them the fee, and they also tell the kid, you need to get a season
Season
pass
pass,
at the,
okay.
I haven't worked, those details are, the families that are interested in this, they're not asking about those questions. What they're telling me is, you need to find a place for my kid to ski.
So
That's
you're
what I'm
trying to
getting.
get approval for these kids to ski this winter?
Well, if we're gonna enter a new co-op, I always have to get school committee chairperson and superintendent and principal, and this literally is just coming together today, and here I am, so I'm just looking for approval to take the next step with Lunenburg, which would be they'd apply to District D committee, and
Do you need our approval or just my approval?
school committee chair is indicated on the application, superintendent of schools, and principal.
So we don't necessarily need to vote on this. I have no problem with supporting this effort. Does anybody else?
I don't think we need a vote. Sounds like a
Okay.
good idea.
Yeah, go ahead. That'd be great.
Approval granted?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Thank
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
All right. All right, AP presentation by Dr. John Harrington. AP means advanced placement.
Oh. Got a little excited.
It doesn't mean Associated Press. Some of us are old, and AP can mean a lot of different things.
Good evening. Start off this year's AP presentation with a list of the courses currently offered at LHS. And for a small school of 470 students, we have a wide range of courses across the arts, sciences, and humanities. And that's the list for the public. You know this because you've seen this before. We have an addition of AP Physics C this year as well. And we do sometimes see some subtle changes based on teacher leaves of absence or due to maternity leaves or whatnot. And we also rotate the AP Art History course out every other year. But you can see in the next slide a longer list of courses, and the students took exams in courses that were not offered by the high school, but they took them. They were prepared sometimes on their own. They studied for it, or they took it. They prepared through some type of online program. Sometimes it was virtual high school, but not always. You know that we don't have a German language program and culture, but a student took the test for that. And this shows strong, motivated, and capable students, no doubt, at Littleton High School. And the results this year, we're quite proud of the participation rate that continues to be strong. Our largest number of exams taken, I think, in the history of the school. It's quite a dramatic increase if you look back across that, look up from that table. Our enrollment, the same number of students, just a lot more kids in this past year taking multiple exams. The next slide, you'll see that we have the highest number of exams at the preferred level of 3 or higher. 92% of our students scored a 3 or had a percentage of exams at that level, 3 or higher. And if you look at the astounding number of 195, in terms of the number of exams at 3 or higher, look at the dramatic increase if you go across from 2011, from 116 to 195. And very proud of the students for their performance there. This chart is just to give you a visual representation of the student scores by year. You can see that, just visually what we're talking about here. In 2016, we had about 36% of our students at the 5 level, and 32% of our students at the 4, and 24% of our students at the 3 level, which is the preferred level. And this table focuses the results for this year, as I just mentioned. And this slide sort of encapsulates the previous two slides for just focus on May 2016. Again, great results, proud of our students' performance. And students with at least one score of 3 at the 3 level, you can see that's what this table captures here. 92 AP students with scores of at least one test or one exam at a 3 or higher. And 94%, 92 students and 94%. That's a great stat if you look across. We've been consistent. The results. I've been proud to come before the school committee each year and brag about our students' performance here because it's been astounding over the last few years. They continue to impress. The percentage of total students, and this is just a graphical depiction of what I just showed you in the table. See if there's and the other thing I'd like just to highlight and just to compliment our students on, of course, it's a smaller sample size, but at 94%, but we continue to really rise above the overall state and global average. And then we'll turn to the AP Scholars. And this is something we like to highlight each year for you. And this year is extra special because of the number of overall AP Scholars, the highest in the history of the school. 42, but that's not including a national AP Scholar already counted. It's actually, I believe the number, I got a corrected version from the College Board after this presentation was created in August, and we had 18 AP Scholars and a total of 43, and that's not including the national AP Scholar, so it's a little higher than that just by one. And then, just for folks, if they were wondering what these mean, what these designations mean, I'll go back to this slide. AP Scholars, I'll just give you a chance to take a look at that slide rather than read it to you. It's based on the number of exams taken and their scores across those exams. And I know you've had a chance to review this in your past. Some performance highlights. 43.8% of our students who took the AP exams were AP Scholars. 65% who took the AP exams took 2 or more. This is a stat in comparison to the overall graduating class. Over half scored a 3 or higher in terms of the whole graduating class. So it's fair to say that Littleton High School students are taking multiple AP exams and excelling in multiple subjects. High participation rate, high performance. Now, special notes for you, just for your consideration in terms of our review. About 12 to 13 AP courses are currently running at the high school. I think it might be 13 because of a virtual high school course that we sponsor with VHS AP Music Theory. And this is a stat I already gave you. 94% of our students scored at least a 3 on one AP exam. We are now offering this year AP Computer Science, and we look to bring back potentially computer science principles next year, so we'll have 3 computer science courses running at the high school. We want to continue to expand computer science, and we're happy to have this course now, AP Computer Science. AP Art History, as I noted, has a rotation and was offered last year, but is not offered this year. I think this is the first or second year that we had 8 students. We offered an AP Stats course. It might have been our first official year, so that's why we highlight the high participation rate, 21 students. AP French is offered this year, and the Latin teacher, Mrs. Kelly, who's also our world language coordinator, opted to participate in the dual enrollment program rather than run an AP Latin course this year. So we've partnered with Middlesex Community College for a Latin 5 course, which students will be eligible for college credit based on their performance. AP Psychology last year is a very popular course. It had 2 sections last year. We do to trying to maintain staffing and a distribution of staffing, especially with expertise. We only offered 1 section this year. Would love to offer more, but that might be a proposal in the budget. We'll look at the forecast for the number of students who are interested in this course. It's extremely popular. The teacher is outstanding and has a high performance history on the with this course. If we were to do that, it would result in a need for us to come before you and request likely additional staffing. And then just a quick snapshot for your consideration of the overall mean score at LHS compared to the state, national, and global average. And as I said, in sum, it's, LHS is proud once again to report high participation rate across multiple AP courses and high performance for our students. It was an outstanding AP performance in May 2016. And I think we have a list of AP scholars, don't we? You want to, Pat? Just if you, I can read the names or just display them if you like.
Go ahead.
16 students who qualified for the AP Scholar with Distinction Award, and a number of these students are now at college. Alana Johnston, who's graduated, is at Stonehill College. She was recently in the Littleton Independent for her track involvement there. I think she's running cross country this season. But I could read the names, or what would you rather just show the list to the public? And 16 students qualified for the AP Scholar with Distinction. 9 students qualified for AP Scholar with Honor Award. And you can see some of these students are graduates, but some of them are seniors now. And they'll be back up on this list in some fashion probably again next year. 18 students qualified for the AP Scholar Award. We congratulate all these students. Hey, there's look at that, third one.
That's the name I know.
Yeah,
I actually know all those names.
yes. Outstanding group of seniors and alumni. And one student we want to especially recognize tonight received recognition as an AP Scholar with Distinction and a National AP Scholar was Henry Bouchard. So congratulations to Henry and all the students. I think that is the last slide. Congratulations. There it is. Thank you very much. Do you have any questions?
Comments, questions?
Great job.
Yeah.
I remember looking at this report, maybe it was last year, and I was thinking, we're going to hit the ceiling eventually, and I thought we already had.
Yeah, enrollment's gone up.
No pressure.
Yeah.
But, I was very impressed by the enrollment numbers, by the percentage of students scoring not just 3 or higher, but 4 or higher, which is usually where selected universities will draw the line for credit or not. And I was excited to see the expansion in the foreign languages, because I know we've had AP Spanish for a long time. French, I think last year was the first year, maybe it was the second year. And I know Mrs. Kelly's been talking about AP Latin, and I love the idea of doing the dual enrollment as an alternative. I'm sure that worked.
It was her preference, yeah.
Her preference, knowing the students and knowing what their needs are. I mean, either I think would be a great capstone to the strength of the Latin program that we've seen grow over the years. Mrs. Temple's not here, but in part because of the work done at the middle school over a couple of years ago. But I was just very impressed by the extent of and the breadth of the courses offered.
You open up this envelope every summer as a principal, you don't quite know how it's going to go, and this was a year that it brought a big smile to my face for sure, yeah. I mean, outstanding.
No, I think this is great, and particularly in terms of the number of students that are doing well in the exams 3 and higher. And what's especially nice to see is the lower scores are challenging some students. It's good to see that they're taking the test there, but they're not. It's not dominating our pieces here. So I think we're probably at the right level here. But the comment on pressure or stress or whatever, as students start taking 2, 3, 4 of these exams, I think we've got to be cognizant of the stress they're putting themselves under and whether that's really what we ought to be emphasizing. And I think we might want to just be careful of that. This is great that they're doing this, but at the same time, you got to watch how much, is the stress really worth it in terms of what pressure they're putting themselves under.
I couldn't agree more. And as you know, every year that I presented to you, I've commented on that, and you just beat me to the punch tonight. I think it's important, especially as we're shining out those names of scholars and it's based on their participation rate. College Board has a lot of incentive for that based on the fees they accrue, but also so they give this designation to students. But while it incentivizes some students, there comes a point where students really, as we talk more about social emotional learning and balance and mindfulness of workload, and having students keeping perspective on what's really important in life and in high school, enjoying a little bit of the high school years. The guidance counselors when they talk to students in the scheduling process, strongly emphasize that students not take too many AP courses. In fact, some high schools have a cap. We don't, but some high schools will limit the number of AP courses students can take. I don't think it's necessarily just a cost control in terms of increasing teaching sections. I think it actually is a deliberate attempt by those schools to make sure students are not overwhelming themselves. Sometimes you do have a precocious student who's incredibly academic and needs to be challenged in a way that is sort of out of the ordinary. And we certainly have students like that every year, and we recognize them. But there are a number of students who are stretching themselves sometimes too thin, and they end up bailing on courses, so these type of courses.
Because if you look at it, if you have 98 students out of, well, juniors and seniors, that'd be 200. That's a 50% participation rate. We're talking sports participation in the 60 to 70% here.
All out.
Time. When is time going to be available for the other things that adolescents
I agree
need to enjoy?
completely.
I think it's a great point.
And I just want to make sure that we're
I think
Yeah.
as a community, we need to stress that the students and the families need to ask themselves, why are you taking this class? If you're taking it because of intellectual curiosity and you want the challenge academically, then knock yourself out. If you're taking it because it's a feather in your cap, it's something that goes on the college application, then you need to think about the balance. Because honestly, the difference between 2 AP classes and 4 AP classes is probably not going to make or break your college placement situation. So I think, and I know you guys are cognizant of this, and I just wanted to get it out there. But you're right, if the kid doesn't participate in sports and because he wants to be a mathlete, literally or figuratively, then we should give him and we clearly do, and that's great. But I think the other thing I would like to say is that I appreciate what you've shown here about, because we are a small school, and being able to offer a breadth of offerings like this. You guys are showing a lot of flexibility and creativity in how you're doing it. And I'd also like to thank the teachers at the high school, because clearly it's not all the students' work here that gets reflected in these scores. It's the commitment to the teachers, because there's extra work for the AP students. It's a different curriculum. And you're going for the test, which I know there's days, weekends where the kids are in the building with their teachers preparing for that. And that's on their time and their dime, so we appreciate that very much. And they should be proud of the students. I know they're proud of their students, but they should be proud of themselves that they can help these kids get to this kind of level.
And year in and year out, the teachers are also, very concerned, not only about the preparation process for the students so that they do well, but they're talking to students all the time about advising them about their course recommendations. Is this the right choice for you? Perhaps you should take a course that is not as challenging. They join the guidance counselors in managing that workload and advising students about that. But certainly this is a credit to the whole community, the parents, the students, and the teachers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Set?
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Our next item of business is we're going to have a discussion about the charter school ballot question that's going to be on the statewide ballot in November. What we're going to do is Alex is going to give us a synopsis of what the charter school question is. We're going to have a discussion amongst ourselves. The Littleton Educator Association has asked to have an opportunity to speak to it, so Mike Gillen is here. He's going to talk about that a little bit. Then we'll decide what we want to do in terms of if there's any action that we want to take in terms of a vote. Quite a few school committees have taken votes on this particular ballot question, but I don't think everybody has, so we can figure out what we want to do. So, Alex, why don't you give us a synopsis of what this question is considering?
Sure. So this is from the Secretary of State's website summarizing it, so it should be about as unbiased as you can get.
I was going to say, can we also have that pop? Can you get the same website and just pop it up on the screen?
What is it?
It's mass.gov/SEC. And you can navigate to elections. And then if you go to, here, why don't I come over?
Yeah, just,
Could we not just plug them in?
oh yeah, you could just take
Well,
this
just
and
plug them in.
Plug
No,
yours
we're
in.
Much
already-
easier.
We're halfway here. Question 2 is the charter school question, and it would propose allowing the State Board of Elementary and Secondary Ed to create 12 new charter schools, up to 12 new charter schools every year, or to expand enrollment in existing charter schools up to 12 every year. Approvals under this law could expand the statewide charter school enrollment by up to 1% each year. Right now it's at 4%, so it would potentially leave up to 5% next year and 6% the year after. If the board receives more than 12 applications in a single year, they are encouraged or required to give priority to proposed charter schools in districts where student performance on statewide assessments is in the bottom 25% of all districts. And one more point I wanted to emphasize. New charters and enrollment expansions approved under this law would be exempt from existing limits. So right now, there's an existing cap on the number of charter schools approved every year and a cap on how much money any one school district can have spent on, I'm trying to say this in the politically correct way, have spent on charter schools instead of the public schools. There's a limit on that. These 12 new charter schools and this ballot initiative would change that cap or remove that cap. And there's an emphasis in this that schools authorized under this law would be subject to annual performance reviews according to the standards set by the board, and that they would have the same standards as other charter schools to recruitment, retention, and multilingual outreach requirements that occur to existing charter schools. So that's my unbiased summary. Courtesy of
Well
Calvin. Yeah. All right.
So, what do we think?
Can I give my unbiased summary?
Keep going, sure.
Jump in. So right now, 174 or 175 school districts, school committees have already endorsed the No on 2 campaign. That's just over half, about 55% of school committees. They've done so for a variety of reasons. One of my bigger concerns, particularly because we're a district that, in my opinion, is served by a pretty good charter school, Francis W. Parker. Personally, my brother went to Parker, and he had an interesting experience there. He enjoyed it, and he thought it was a good school. I still think this affects us, and even though we don't anticipate being the bottom 25% of school districts anytime soon, which I say sort of tongue-in-cheek, there is a concern that this affects our district, because if you expand the number of charter schools, you expand the number of charter school students, and you expand the amount of charter school reimbursements. The charter school reimbursement from the state has been about half of what it should be under the mandate, which means that instead of getting the 100% reimbursement the first year and 25 the years after, a lot of school districts are getting the first year and then the second year, and then that's it. The current mandate under the state law for the charter school reimbursement is about $134 million a year, and what the legislature funded it at was about 75 to 80 million this past year, which is very, very low. The other piece I want to point out is that obviously for us, one of the biggest drivers is special education funding. And charter schools, although they're required to take special education students, whoever comes up in the lottery is to be entered into that charter school, or have the choice to be entered into that charter school. Oftentimes, there are records of charter schools not emphasizing special ed, in part because they're operating in a system where they're incentivized not to. So I don't want to sort of place blame, but the reality of the situation is that they tend to spend fewer resources on special ed, because where we will, for instance, have a new FTE for a Tier 4 program at Russell Street, because we see these high-need students coming in. We want to support their needs and their educational needs, but we also know that if we are proactive, we can keep them in district and keep them in the most inclusive learning environment. A charter school, if you have a special ed kid, as my brother was at Parker, you can have a very good learning environment, but you don't emphasize the special ed. You don't have the same sort of special ed support staff that a district like Littleton does. And so when that student's needs go beyond the scope of the charter school, they say, well, we're not required to send you out of district. We're not required to send you to Case. If your needs aren't met here, you can go back to the district. That student, like my brother, comes back to Littleton. Maybe if that student had been receiving those supports in district, they wouldn't then be an out-of-district placement, and then gets shifted to an out-of-district placement after spending a couple of years at the charter school. Charter schools offer a lot of good opportunities to be a learning laboratory. That was the idea we were sold on in 1993. But how much that is actually executed in practice is under review, under question. And so my concern is that this ballot initiative is not pro-charter or anti-charter. And I'm not anti-charter, but I would encourage us to take a no on 2 vote, not because we're anti-charter, but because we're anti-12 new charter schools every year forever with no caps, no changes to revenue, and no changes to regulatory reform. We're required to adopt, to be very transparent in our budgets. They are not. We take everybody, and follow that student, and that student is our responsibility, whether they're in district, whether they're at Case, whether they're in out-of-district placement. We are with them from age 5 or 6 to age 22. And that's our responsibility. And so I think there's a room for charter schools in Massachusetts public education. I don't think that we've hit that balance yet, and I think that this ballot question, if passed, would tip us very far in the wrong direction.
Joe?
So, had jotted my notes and left them on my computer, so I re-jotted them now. So, originally when you were polling whether we wanted to have this as a topic here, one of the things is I'm not really interested in being some advertisement's soundbite of, yet another, on both sides of it, yet another school district opposed to charter schools. Let me open with, I'm not opposed to charter schools. I think they provide an alternative education model that we can't always accommodate in our standard public schools here. The model they use at Parker works for certain students, but it doesn't necessarily work for all students. We're mandated to teach all students here. And that brings me to the piece there which is different about charter schools, is the students are self-selected. Everybody that goes to charter school because they want to go to the charter school. So it's not a random selection of students that are that we typically would see in a larger population here. So I think they're different in that sense there. And I did look at some of the stats from the special needs pieces there, and they are noticeably lower in percentage of number of special ed students and other pieces there that, again, it's not a judgment as to whether plus or minus on how they're managing those students there, but it is statistically different than the public schools there, which then really brings back in terms of going back where my real beef is with the Chapter 70 funding and the models there, because it's not clear how those differences are accounted for. We lose a fixed amount of dollars off the town budget to the charter school with no vote of the town. It is just taken from our budget and provided to them. At least with the vocational school, we get their budget and we get an opportunity to have a presentation on that budget. We appoint a school committee member that is represented there, and the town gets to vote plus or minus that they accept that budget request from the vocational school. We have no such insight in terms of how our monies are being used for the charter schools. Right? It's an aspect of control that is just not happy with, comfortable. We have to live with it. Whether we have to continue to support it is a different piece there. And the other piece I want to touch on is what's the impact to the public district here on it. Like I said, when a student goes to the charter schools there, we lose a fixed amount. I think our number is between $12,000 and $13,000 if I did the math based on the pieces here. But our cost does not go down $12,000 or $13,000 for every one of those charter students that goes out. We can't lay off 1/26th of a teacher or whatever our classroom size is. So our cost is maintained. So the net effect to the residents of Littleton is our per pupil cost goes up, which then gets reflected in the tax rate there, which is not being reimbursed by the state through Chapter 70 or any of the other aid mechanisms back to the town. So this piece of just adding more and more of them without addressing all of the fundamentals is not the right way of addressing, you know, the desire to have alternative education models supported by the public school systems, you know. And I think they're, again, sound bites, they're used very clever in terms of the use of the word public schools, that the charter schools are public schools, but they're different here. And if we want to talk about providing the right educational models for learners of all different styles, abilities, and pieces there, we need to be doing that holistically and not through targeted little ballot initiatives that may or may not have the right incentives for the right educational objectives of all students. So I'm basically opposed to question 2 at this point.
I've got more to say, but to Daryl, your very last point about him being a little targeted ballot initiative, I think this is a sweeping, broad ballot initiative, which is how I'm going to kick off what I say. I'm glad that my 2 healthy colleagues got to say a lot of the stuff that I agree about, so I'm not going to repeat everything
Don't
that they said.
talk too hard.
But honestly, I agree with just about everything that Daryl and Alex said. Charter schools have a lot of good things to offer. We've got Parker as part of our district, and you know, I have a lot of close friends of mine who went there. They had great experiences there. They, you know, could not have been better off if they had gone to Littleton. They are happy with what they did there. And you do see really great statistics around the Commonwealth of, you know, some of the high-performing charter schools and lower-performing school districts, and those are great. To Alex's point, that's sort of the purpose of why, or that's not the purpose of why they were existed. The purpose that they were created for was to be laboratories to take new learning pedagogies and other delivery methods, and to then hopefully one day take the best practices and move them into the traditional schools. It's unclear, I think, at least to me, about how that actually has happened. But when you look at some of those statistics that, like Daryl said, it was very cleverly wordsmithed in commercials and things like that, what you don't see is that in most of these, or in lower performing school districts, they do not have the same demographics that mirror the traditional, you know, public school in the district. They tend to have much fewer students with learning disabilities, much fewer students who have English as not their first language, much fewer homeless students, much fewer low-income students. And so obviously, those are maybe some of the reasons why the traditional public schools do not have the same statistics that the charter schools have. And so while I do think they have a lot to offer, I do not support the idea of having a ballot question to propagate more of them. I totally support the ballot initiative process. You know, it exists for a reason, but this is an area of policy that's so intricate and sweeping, at least the way that this one's drafted, that I personally don't support voting yes. I personally will be voting no on question 2. You know, when I look at it, I ask, what does a town like Littleton, you know, ultimately, speaking from school committee members' perspective, I have to wonder, what does the ballot question what does Littleton have to gain from the ballot question, and what do we have to lose? And personally, I don't personally see a huge amount of upside from it. We have a good charter school. People like it. I think we, you know, have been existing now since, I don't know when it was created, 1994 or 5, I think Parker was created. And I think the status quo in that area is okay for a town like Littleton. If I was a school committee member on another board, maybe from one of these urban school districts or low-performing school district, I would be tremendously concerned about what the impact could be on our district. Because again, it's not adding 1 or 2 here and there, it's adding up to 12 per year anywhere in the Commonwealth indefinitely. And that part concerns me, but we're not here to give advice to other school committees. So I guess, yeah, in sum, I'll be voting no on it. I support the ballot initiative process, so I support the right for people to go vote how they choose, but I don't see any upside for a resident of Littleton or a school committee member in Littleton.
I actually don't like the ballot initiative process. I think it's a poor way to govern. I think that, and you hit on it, Mike, I mean, trying to come up with the nuances required to set policy so that it's most beneficial and at the same time, least harmful, I don't see how you can possibly do that in a ballot. And I'm mostly against, I vote no on a lot of ballot questions just because I don't like the ballot idea, and I want to see the legislature, executives, the governor's office do their job. Having said that, you can see that there's frustration out there. That's why this ballot question exists. Massachusetts does have some charter schools, but they've been stuck for a while. My hope is that the legislature and other associated parties relative to primary and secondary education in Massachusetts take this as a wake-up call, and even if it doesn't pass, they understand that they're, depending on, because I think it's going to be a fairly close vote, I hope they take on the realization that there are people that want some change, that they want some evaluation about how we're doing this, and that they should take that as direction to get it to work and see if they can come up with a good balance that does a lot of the things that we have said we support charter schools in general can do for the Commonwealth and for Littleton, but I think that they need to make sure that they try, and they can't just walk away and say, well, now we can just sit on our fannies again, which we have been doing for quite a while. I agree with quite a few of the things that I think the hesitations that we all have as school committee members about how charter schools are implemented and the effect they can have on the sending districts, both financially and with the student population. And I think that, when you think about sound bites, that's glossed over quite a bit, quite easily by proponents of charter schools. Some proponents of charter schools are clearly in the public education for profit arena. They clearly, I don't have any truck with that. I don't want to listen to them at all, and I have a big problem with them. But there are legitimate supporters of charter schools that support public education in general. But they need to understand that when they talk about the charter schools, it can't always be about what the charter school represents. It has to be, there's a second side of the equation. They have to understand what that is, and it has to be acknowledged and addressed. And we're going to talk about the MASC conference that's coming up, and there's a warrant on an article on there about the foundation budget and how the legislature talks about that, and it's there, but they don't fund it. And that's the problem I have with charter schools, is that it's a great idea in theory, but when the practice is executed, they have to understand that if they don't fund it correctly and they do it on the backs of the sending districts, that's a major problem. That stuff needs to get ironed out, and it can't get ironed out in the ballot, in my mind anyway, by a ballot vote. So I agree. I'm not really supportive of this. I'm clearly not supportive of this for some of the same reasons, but also just for the way the ballot works, or the ballots can work. So I'd like to invite the LEA up. Is that all right? Mike Gillen?
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for giving me a chance to speak. My name is Mike Gillen. I'm the president of the Littleton Educators Association. It's the local teachers union in town. I'm also a chemistry teacher at the high school. And again, first and foremost, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to speak. In particular, I've liked what I've heard, so I'll keep this short. It's not, I don't need to rehash what's already been said. I do have two goals here, one of which, again, will be quick. It's been talked about already. One goal is certainly to answer any questions people would have, or the community members would have about the ballot question. Another is to represent the teachers in my union, to urge that the school committee take an official stance of opposing the ballot question, voting no on ballot question number 2. As you saw, and I passed it out just now, teachers felt strongly enough about this issue that we as a union passed a resolution opposing it ourselves. And so before I get into the sort of the meat of the actual ballot question, I just want to draw your attention to the significance that there is such a resolution from the teachers union. The LEA does not take an official stance on political issues as a general rule. To my knowledge, we haven't taken one in the time I've been here. So the fact that there is one really speaks to how strongly teachers felt about this issue. And not only do we feel strongly about it, but this is a political issue that is squarely in the realm of all of our professional expertise as educators. And we felt it was important to make a public statement about that. If you have an important medical decision to make, you consult a doctor. If you have an important legal decision to make, you consult a lawyer. Well, the state of Massachusetts has an important educational decision to make. And so we feel it is important that they hear from educators. Two quick disclaimers, one of which has certainly already been mentioned. The Littleton Teachers Union has no problem with charter schools themselves, with the teachers who work in the charter schools, with the students who go to the charter schools, or with the parents who send their kids to the charter schools. The issue is not about the schools, it's about the laws that govern the schools, how they're funded and how they're governed. Second disclaimer I would make, and this could have been mentioned, but I didn't hear it, so I think it's important to the discussion. The current ballot question has no effect on existing charter schools. It's a question of will we allow more of them, yes or no. But it's not taking away any existing charter schools. I think that's important to consider. The ballot question itself, then, is simply asking, are we going to allow more charters? And as you may have also mentioned, charter schools are schools that are publicly funded but run by private corporations. There's currently a limit on the number that are allowed. The ballot question is only asking, will we eliminate that limit or will we keep it? Our strongest sort of primary concern about charter schools, certainly as it affects Littleton, we feel that the laws that currently govern how charter schools are funded do harm to Littleton students. Teachers are in a position to see firsthand what a lack of or diminished funding can do in the classroom. As we've talked about, charter schools are funded as though they receive a representative sample of high-need students. That's special education students and English language learners. But in fact, they don't accept and retain that representative sample, so they're paid more than is required to educate the students that they retain. What that means is the high-need students remain in the public schools, Littleton, and it means the money that is there to educate them winds up at the charter schools. Teachers in Littleton are interested in making positive change in this district. We love this district. We care about the quality of the service that we provide. And imagine what that funding could do. I mean, decrease class size, especially at the elementary levels, increase access to, for example, like art and music and physical education, again, especially at the elementary levels, and help to offset the costs of a significant cost center in delivering the services that special education students need. So that's our primary reason. That's what's referenced on the resolution. And a second sort of piece to this that I would just mention quickly, and Daryl mentioned it quickly, but I want to stress an important point that Littleton teachers cared about was that charter schools do not answer to elected representatives. Taxpayers have no voice in how their tax money is spent once it's in the hands of charters. And that is a serious flaw in how public education is supposed to run. So I suppose, in conclusion, I would simply mention, again, that the ballot question is asking, will we allow more charter schools or not? And based on the laws that currently fund charter schools, and in our strong opinion, harm the education of Littleton students, harm the ability of the Littleton Public Schools to deliver educational services, we would strongly urge that the school committee vote no and officially support opposing this ballot question. And I suppose if I could say one more quick thing, just based on the discussion I heard, if I could add one thing, it would be this, that ultimately what we're talking about here is a view of how we want public education to run in the future. So I would echo what Mike said, that there are a lot of concerns here in terms of how public education runs, and this is a sort of a heavy-handed, very sweeping change to public education, and I think there are a lot of ramifications that need to be considered very carefully. So we'd urge a no vote, and again, thank you very, very much for the opportunity to speak.
Can I just make a comment?
Yes.
At first, I'll say I was trying very hard not to cough at the end, because I could tell you were getting to something good, and it came up anyway. I want to thank you and Daryl for emphasizing the point that Daryl made earlier. When I talk to people about this ballot question, I think people have a general idea of what it is. I think they know the general concerns that the opponents have about the cost and things like that, and the general, reasons to vote for it. But I have not heard that concern echoed elsewhere, that I don't think people realize that these schools are all run by private corporations and that there is not a vote from a public entity. So to Daryl's point, the taxpayers in Littleton do not have a vote to say, yes, let's send this check out to a charter school. The money gets taken out anyway, but there isn't sort of a public school committee. We are all sitting here, there are however many school committees there are around the state, because people feel like it ought to be, a principle that we hold close, that there should be taxpayers or lay people who are, have some voice in the schools. And charter schools, which claim to be public schools, don't have that same input.
It's a question, it's not even a question of just sending the money, it's a question of not having the ability to hold the recipients of the funding accountable to what we feel they should be held accountable,
Exactly,
because there are kids from our district, from our community, and it's our tax dollars, so why shouldn't we have, why shouldn't we be able to be, see that accountability? And we can't. That's a big problem. And again, saying private entities, some of them are, private, non-profit entities who do an excellent job. So if that were the case, and it very well, I think we've seen it in our experiences with friends and family, that Parker is one of those, and that's okay, and they do a good job. So we probably would be like, you guys are doing great, we're very happy, thank you, but it would be nice to get on record as understanding why are we happy, and we can't do that. But then there's that, and it's not so much pronounced in Massachusetts as it is in other parts of the country, but it's that private for-profit entities that are trying to elbow their way into this marketplace. And I say marketplace because that's the way they view it. They don't necessarily view it as we're here to do good. They're not actively trying to do harm, I don't think, but they're not motivated the way a private nonprofit would be to, do what we expect public education to do. If they want to be private providers of education, there's a model for that. It's out there, and they can do that. But to have them come in and take public tax dollars and public school children and not have that level of accountability, I think is something we have been able to avoid in Massachusetts, fortunately. But there's a lack of check and balance by opening up the floodgate that we would conceivably lose, and we wouldn't be able to say that as confidently down the road if this kind of thing happens the way they're proposing it to happen. So, all right.
The other thing I would add is that this ballot question was not written originally with a purpose of going to the ballot. It was written as a chit in a internal and then external debate in the legislature about how to move forward on charter school policy. This was sort of if we walk away from the table, we're going to bring this to the ballot, so listen up and do what we ask. That didn't end up happening, which is why it's now in the ballot. There were also on the other side a lot of reforms proposed to pair with increasing the number of charter schools, including changes in special education, adding a local control component, adding state funding, so the funding's not coming from the public school districts, better communication of best practices, public record laws that apply to us should apply to them, whether that's on the finances piece, the public reporting piece, or just the plain public records laws. Better commitments to teacher retention. Charter schools churn through teachers really quickly, and it's not good for anybody. And teacher training, because we hold our teachers to a high standard, and charter schools are exempt from those standards. And a lot of other ideas as well. So this is not the first public policy swing. And it's not the only chance, not the first chance, it's not the fifth chance that charter schools have had to increase the number of charter schools or the number of students in charter schools in Massachusetts, even this year. Those were all discussed this year, and they didn't want
Let me
to.
interrupt you, and it won't be the last.
No, it won't. And
Regardless
discussion
of a
will
yes or
continue.
no vote on the ballot, it won't be the last opportunity for the Commonwealth to determine if they want to increase or, change the way charter schools are, brought online and governed and do their business in Massachusetts. All right. We're going to entertain any motions this evening relative to this.
I make a motion that the Littleton School Committee take a resolution to endorse the No One Two campaign.
That we make a resolution, can you phrase that again?
Let me rephrase that. I make a motion that the Littleton School Committee resolve to endorse the No One Two campaign.
Before anybody thinks about seconding that, I want a point of clarification. What is the No On 2 campaign?
Sorry, sure. I instantly understood where you're coming from here. Not the endorsement of the campaign, the endorsement of a no vote.
Okay.
A no vote.
Because the No On 2 campaign sounds like it could be a lot
Right,
of
right, which is
So I just wanna
not
make sure
at all
that
my
that's not what we're
intent. We
doing.
want to stay away from that.
Thank you.
We want to try to be as
You could be more
apolitical as possible.
specific and just make a motion stating that you do not support the removal of the current cap on the charter schools. If you want to be that specific.
I would like to specify question two.
Yeah, I agree with your point, Kelly, the concept behind, but I'd like to reference the ballot question.
Yeah.
Because the remarks
I
had so
just
much to do
want
with
to,
the
I want to
specific
reference it a
question.
little bit, maybe a little bit more
Okay.
cleanly, so let's try again.
I make a motion that the school committee resolve to endorse a no vote on question 2.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
I'm comfortable with that.
Okay. All right, we have a motion on the table, it's been seconded. Do we have any further discussion on it? All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. All right, thank you. All right, thanks, Mike. Thank you. All right. Speaking of the Massachusetts Association of School Committees.
I think we were.
So they have their annual conference coming up November 2nd to the 5th, 2016. What do we think we're going to do? Anybody going? Anybody want to go?
They're on the
Actually,
vote.
Daryl's
Yeah,
going.
I'm our delegate.
Sit down to Cape again?
I'm going to stay up here.
I'm just going to drive down for the Friday session.
Okay. All right, good. You'll come back and let us know how it was?
Yep.
All right. How about the MASC resolutions? We have them, should we evaluate them? Are we going to take a vote on in favor of them, or do we just want to, do we have to give you direction on what you think, right?
That's the purpose of this section, is to have a discussion on the resolutions that are before you.
All right, so I'm just going to get it up there. All right, how many of them are there?
4.
Not too bad.
One of them we just
Yeah.
talked, not exactly, but the same subject.
Yeah, I was going to say is, I'll just open on Resolution 1, the foundation budget. Something needs to continued emphasis on getting both the Chapter 70 funding formula straightened out and a little bit more equity with the funding of the schools. And again, no offense to the town, one of our neighbors here, but it just strikes me weird, unexplainable. Westford received $16,400,000 in Chapter 78 for 5,100 students, which works out to be about $3,180 per student. Littleton gets $3.8 million for 1,600 students, which works out to $2,400 per student.
It's a massive difference.
I
That's
can't
a 25%.
can't understand how the formula comes up in justifying that in almost every metric of economic indicators, Westford is a wealthier community than Littleton, yet they receive significantly more funding per student than we do. So this
It's
is
not
just-
right. It's not Westford
it's-
versus Littleton. It could
It's
be.
the funding formula.
Right. It
is-
could be
is-
upper
is-
Volta versus lower Volta.
It's just unexplainable
Exactly.
in
It's
terms
not-
of,
It's not functioning the way it's supposed to function.
right.
It's supposed to create a level playing field when you adjust for certain factors.
Right.
And clearly, it's not.
Or it's unexplainable to
Right.
even people that
Right.
look at it as often as they try to understand it. So, I'm leaning that in favor of this resolution from city.
Any other discussion on that? All right, just entertain a motion.
Make a motion that the Littleton School Committee support MASC Resolution 1 on the foundation budget.
Second.
Motion made a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. All right, Resolution 2 is a tax reform ballot question.
If I jump in?
Yeah, I figure we're probably going to have some discussion on this one, so you can start on this one.
I was going to point out that this this resolution goes hand in hand with the one we just voted on a second ago with regard to the foundation budget. The foundation budget's number, the Foundation Budget Review Commission, the FBRC, came up with a report that we are underfunding the existing Chapter 70 formula, which again isn't even enough itself, but starting somewhere, by about by over $500 million. I forget the exact figure, but over $500 million. This question, Resolution 2, would raise that, and there is no other discussion happening about how to do that, about how to raise that. I know from our conversation about this last year that we're not really comfortable saying we're a body that raises taxes, and we're not going to be. What this question does is it says, just as we voted a moment ago on the charter school ballot question, we believe that this has an impact on students in Littleton, on education in Littleton, and education across Massachusetts. And I think we had a meeting maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago where I made some comment about potentially a new source of funding, and Mike Fontanella looked at me, sort of funny, and said, "What do you know that I don't?" And this is what I was referring to. The MASC tried last year to adopt this as a resolution. They really want to be a team player in making sure that this happens, and they want to be able to say this is something that will have an improvement, improving effect on public education in Massachusetts. They said themselves afterwards that they didn't feel they had done enough education or outreach on this. So hopefully this year we can get there. That would be my hope.
The second last paragraph is something you should read over. It's action-packed.
Right. And I guess if you don't mind if I jump in at this point, this is where I get opposed to this for several different reasons. One, I'm not sure that MASC is who I'm looking for in terms of tax reform or the initiator of tax reform here. And then the tax reform they're talking about here doesn't really give me assurances that it's going to be directed towards being applied to educational needs. I have a different perspective on tax reform, which looks at how we're currently spending our existing tax dollars and whether they're being applied in a manner that is consistent with the goals of everybody in the state there. Given that the legislature has made trade-offs and not funded education and funded other programs, it leaves a question in one's mind is whose priorities are being met here. It's also not clear that once the undefined state wealthiest are taxed, whether that money is actually going to be directed towards education. It's going to be directed towards the general fund, which is then going to be back to the same politicians that are currently allocating the tax dollars that we currently provide them here. So I'm not in favor of this initiative here for two reasons. One, I'm not sure that a directed tax against an undefined wealthiest residents of Massachusetts is an appropriate phraseology. And two, I don't believe MASC is a tax policy organization, and that's not necessarily what I'm looking for them to be doing. I'm expecting them to be focusing on the educational needs and of the students.
I agree and disagree a little bit with what Daryl said. I do believe that it is within the role of an educational organization like this to explore other ways. You know, if it's not being funded adequately right now, then why shouldn't they be exploring other ways of doing it? I do agree that, I guess I wouldn't support a vote that said, you know, if MASC had the authority to make the changes that we're talking about, I guess I probably wouldn't vote for necessarily based on the language that we've given to support it. But given that it's an entity that this is right within their wheelhouse about education funding, that I would support them exploring this further. So I'm not terrible, you know, I'm not tremendously in favor of it.
But the resolution says explore ways to promote social and economic equity through a ballot initiative. It doesn't say promote education, increase funding for education objectives.
Well, you can read
Following
that in the
paragraph.
context throughout the
following
preambles.
paragraph.
Yeah.
You can, but you don't have to.
You don't have to.
Well, you do.
Right.
No, you don't.
The last paragraph.
resolution is explore ways to promote social and economic equity.
Further, that the goal of such a ballot referendum would be to secure a stronger financial base to underwrite needed improvements in the infrastructure of the Commonwealth, as well as the educational, social, and
Infrastructure of the Commonwealth means roads.
As well as the
MASC has
So-
nothing to do
so
with increasing
here-
the funding for
here's-
roads.
Here's my
It's
thing.
all inclusive.
There's no question that if the MASC got involved in this, they would be advocating for the spending of additional revenues on education.
Right.
However, what they've done here to make this politically palatable is basically said, let's raise taxes and spend it on everything. And I don't see how, again, and to Daryl's point, how would they determine? The other thing is, there's nothing in this initiative that they couldn't do anyway without a voted resolution by the conference. If they feel like they should be if the management of the MASC feels like they should be up on Beacon Hill lobbying for tax reform to help education or anything else, I don't see any reason why. I think they already do that, right? I mean, they have a charter to go advocate for public education. What they're asking for is a stamp of approval from us to do what I frankly would expect them to kind of be already doing anyway as part of many things that they do. But I don't see any reason why they would be precluded from doing some of this just because they either got a vote or didn't get a vote on this.
They were sorry, go ahead.
No, I just think it's so general as to be meaningless, and what are we doing? We're not really supporting anything by voting on it.
Well, I guess that's the reason why I'm sort of ambivalent on it, is I agree with a lot of Daryl's points that this may not be the perfect wording and whatnot, but I also agree that it in some ways, it can't hurt because it's so general that they should be doing it anyways. It's not adding any mandate or anything on top of that, so.
But it is a little bit, because it's specifically, well, I wouldn't say specifically, it's citing the possibility of, instead of general tax reform or general reform on how we spend current tax revenues, it's let's go get money from a particular group, ill-defined as it may be.
Or undefined purposes.
Right.
So I want to shed some light here on the specifics, because I don't think it's ambiguous. It is in this resolution, but this resolution was written, can I finish?
No, I want to limit our discussion to what's in front of us, not what you may know from other.
I know how this resolution came to be, because I was in the General Assembly last year.
But what's in front of us is what's written here, not the discussion from last year, not the discussion from other events or activities. We're being asked to vote on providing an initiative that will further tax a selected subset of residents within the state for underwriting improvements to the infrastructure of the Commonwealth.
When you receive a report on MCAS scores, don't you want to know how the MCAS, what those scores mean and what those numbers mean and how the report is written? I don't think we run any risk by discussing how the MASC came to this particular wording in this resolution which was not the wording for the resolution last year, and was in fact a response to the General Assembly's concern over the wording last year.
Okay.
The specifics of this, or rather the lack thereof, and I hear your point there, of this resolution is based on the fact that there is going to be, absolutely going to be a question on the 2018 ballot with regard to raising a 4% surtax on all incomes over $1 million for the purpose of education and infrastructure. And the Attorney General has ruled that the language dictates that spending, that all revenue raised from that, which is expected to be $1.9 billion as a conservative estimate, must be spent on education and infrastructure. It does not go to the general fund. It goes to education and infrastructure. Now, the legislature can say, that's Chapter 70, that's circuit breaker, that's charter schools. They have the wherewithal to say how an education that is spent, but it is
Or to
required.
offset it from what was previously.
Right, but it would be required. So the concern, speaking to the concern that the funding is not going directly to education, that's not the case. Now, it is also
Whoa,
going to...
you're
Hold it.
drawing a conclusion there, Alex.
You're-
It's not supported by this resolution.
Right.
You're using information you have, and it's really not even information, it's just discussion or
It's the
debate.
Attorney
I
General's
know, I
ruling.
understand that, but that's a particular ballot question that's not being referenced in this resolution. It's not being referenced.
I do agree that we should.
When
the-
that
the
ballot question
context
is
really
coming up, and
important.
MASC is something that we can talk about it. I think you're right. I'm not questioning what's going to happen. I think you've got a pretty good handle on what's going to go down the line.
Your concern's process.
But hasn't gone down the line yet. And this is way too general. It's not talking about that at all.
And I think we had the same conversation last year. It's eerily similar that we had trouble, at least I had trouble with the way it was phrased, right? They have all year long to wordsmith these things. And to both, we're arguing the same thing. Alex is adding very helpful information to this, that they had a year to parse out whether they wanted to include that or not. And what we're left with is the text on this page. And if we're voting to support, it's one thing to talk about it, but to have a formal school committee vote in favor of something or else, we're voting on the words that are on this page. And it sounds like we don't have a consensus to vote in support of it, so.
What
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Just as a point of order, just to help me, frankly. So we can either vote yes, or we can vote no, or we can not vote, right? That-
During the General Assembly discussion, do you think it would be appropriate, regardless of whether we take a yes vote or a no vote, or vote that Darrell abstain, Darrell, do you think you would be willing to say, before we even got into the meat of the question, we were frustrated by the wording of the resolution, and that was a sticking point for us, just to give that feedback to
Well,
them?
I mean, if what was in front of us was this draft 2018 ballot question, it might be a different discussion, but that's not what we're discussing.
Can we, when you go to the General Assembly, can you point that out?
Can you point out that the reason that we did or didn't do what we are about to do or not do
That is the question.
was more a reflection of the generality and the lack of specificity of this question than it was about the merits of the being debated in the article?
Right.
Are you comfortable with that?
I'm just writing down so I can.
You have to get it exactly right.
Well, no,
I
I'm
know
just
it
jotting myself
sounds
some
great.
notes,
You
yeah.
probably want
Yeah.
to say it just like that.
Well, no,
to
it-
show how smart you are.
Polish it up a little bit.
So, yeah, and not to play rock management there, I don't, I still don't know how I would vote on seeing the text of.
I agree. I don't know how I would
of
vote
the
either.
question.
I don't, and that's why, right.
There,
Right, I don't want the message to be, geez, if you had put better language in there, we would have supported this part of it, because we may not.
Right.
We may not, I think we see the direction that they're trying to get to. We still may not, because we haven't had that debate yet, and I haven't even thought about it.
Yeah, and I would say it's among the reasons why, not the reason why.
And it precluded us from having that discussion.
I'd prefer that we don't vote against it as either, because I think it sends the impression, like we're saying, it's too general to, I personally think it's too general to even vote that our school committee opposes.
I personally agree with that as well. I take no action. You okay with that, Darrell?
Yep.
All right, great, thank you. I think we.
But I think just to clarify, what I think I'll do is I'll probably, if they offer an opportunity to speak to the things there, I'll explain why we're abstaining there and not taking a position based on the generality and lack of specifics, which caused us not to be able to reach a true understanding of what the purpose of the ballot question or the resolution was.
Is that good, Alex?
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. I think we all know where we are with charter school reform. However, I think we should take a separate vote on this relative specific to this resolution.
Can we take a vote to ask a representative to abstain on this resolution too?
Yeah, I'd prefer that we actually don't vote in favor or in opposition to this.
But we take
Which
a
one,
vote-
number 3?
Number two.
Number 2.
Oh, you want-
That we take a vote to abstain.
Yeah, I had interpreted our discussion to be that vote. We didn't actually vote it.
Okay.
But I took that as the direction from the committee.
Yeah, I think we could vote. I don't think we need to, because he doesn't have direction to vote against it or for it when he gets.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm, whether we vote
Vote to
or
abstain.
just.
Instructions for
Instructions.
our
I'm looking
delegate to
at-
abstain.
That's
I don't think we
consensus,
need-
that's not a vote.
I'm
That's
getting the committee
consensus.
consensus
We have
on our
consensus.
position.
I don't
He
think
doesn't have
we-
authority to
We
vote
did
for
vote
or
on the
against
first
it. so-
resolution.
Yeah.
Because we wanted to vote yes or no, and we voted
Okay.
yes. This one, I don't want to vote at all. I don't think it's appropriate to vote at all, because we don't have a vote.
I would-
Vote to abstain is not a vote.
We did just vote to support a.
Individually, you can abstain from a vote, but as a group, we can't have a vote and then all abstain.
We could take a vote instructing our delegate to abstain, but I don't think that's necessary.
that's what I
It's
was-
implicit. It's
Oh,
the
Yeah, whether
default.
we need a motion on each one of these four, I'm capturing the sense of the committee on these resolutions here, and we'll vote the sense of the committee, which is on Article 2 is to, Resolution 2 is to abstain.
So,
Wait till I come to town meeting. Mike, do I ever really get
Exactly.
pass up an opportunity to
all
look
right,
up
all
at
right.
least
So we're
once?
clear on
Made
2.
me look good.
All right. On 3, well, I think we all know where we stand. We want to take a vote on the resolution to support or not support this particular resolution. I'm in favor of taking a vote to support the resolution.
As a,
It's fine with me.
All right? Entertain a motion?
I make a motion that the school committee instruct our delegate to support resolution 3 regarding charter school reform.
Second.
Motion made and second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All right, Resolution 4, social and emotional well-being of students.
I think we should get a gold star and take the credit for this one or something. I mean, I absolutely support it, but I also think, I don't know, we should bring in Kelly and have him do like a victory lap or something around the room, because, I'm not kidding. I think we've really been leading the Commonwealth in this.
I appreciate that. I think this is a natural extension of a lot of work that started, I would say, what, there were about 4 or 5 years ago, the anti-bullying legislation came out, and I think that led to more thought about what does that actually mean. I mean, you can say anti-bullying all you want, but what does that mean? And I think it's evolved into a very fruitful and well-rounded discussion and direction to school districts about how we can take care of our kids in a lot of different ways. So I'm perfectly in support of this. It is a fairly general type of initiative, a resolution, but I'm fine with that. It just gives the MASC approval from their membership to keep driving the bus.
I echo what both of you guys just said.
Make your motion.
I make a motion that the school committee instructs its delegate to the MASC conference to support Resolution 4 with regard to social and emotional well-being of students.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. All right, thank you. All right, we're at interested citizens. Seeing none, literally seeing none. Superintendent's report.
Dr. Jamian is just going to give you a real brief overview of the guidelines that have been given to us in regard to the 2016-17 MCAS 2.0 offering.
Thank you. It will be brief. We are now in to what is informally called MCAS 2.0, or the next generation of MCAS tests. MCAS assessments are, believe it or not, about 20 years old. And the MCAS 2.0, the next generation MCAS, will be given for the first time in the spring of 2017 for grades 3 to 8 in math and ELA. The next generation MCAS builds on the best practices of the MCAS assessments, 2 decades of MCAS assessments, and incorporates innovations from the PARCC testing. The MCAS 2.0 is being designed to be taken on the computer. So at the same time of announcing the redesign and reformulation of the MCAS assessments, the DESE also set forth a transition plan for computer-based statewide testing for virtually all students by the spring of 2019. The rationale is that computer-based testing offers a richer, more engaging content and a wider range of accessibility features for students, and it also reflects the reality, the times that we live in and the students are growing up in, that they are increasingly using technology in and out of their classroom to learn and produce written work. So in my report to you tonight, I want to first review aspects of the computer-based transition plan that DESE set forth. What are the major factors for districts to consider in that plan, and what were the considerations that Littleton engaged in and decisions that our district made? First of all schools are expected to administer the computer-based versions of the ELA and math MCAS tests for grades 4 and 8. That's the minimal computer-based participation. Paper tests will be, our paper versions of all tests are available as an accommodation as required by a student's individualized education program or IEP. For grades 3, 5, 6, and 7, districts may elect either computer-based or paper-based MCAS tests in some combos. The grade 10 math and ELA tests that are used for competency determination and graduation requirements, as well as all the science and technology and engineering tests for grades 5, 8, and high school, they remain paper-based only. And then after this first year of transition statewide, DESE itself will formulate more, finalize further aspects of the transition plans, because they'll be reviewing what goes on. So in September, the superintendent, the technology coordinators, and I participated in a training webinar with DESE, and we brought aspects of that presentation to the administrative council for deliberation and the consideration of the principals. And the decision was made to administer computer-based tests in grades 4 and 8 only, to stick with the minimum. And there are a number of factors that we considered in reaching this decision. First of all, districts were asked to take a look at their school's infrastructure, their network. We feel we're doing very well in this area. You've had reports on the district strategic plan and reports on the school improvement plan, specifically in the technology standard that address infrastructure, in aspects of the infrastructure and bandwidth, and also the availability of devices for students. The MCAS 2.0 is being designed to be taken on different types of devices, whether it's Chromebook, laptop, a number of different tablets. And again, the district feels that we've made progress in this area. Neither the infrastructure nor bandwidth nor availability of devices for student use were considered limiting factors. The principals themselves were looking at deciding about the testing schedule itself. How many students will be tested in each testing session, or in other words, how many students are tested concurrently. As the number of students tested concurrently goes up, you need more devices, and your testing schedule and number of test sessions then changes. The new MCAS 2.0 requires 3 ELA sessions for grades 3 to 5 and 2 sessions for grades 6 to 8. And there are 2 sessions for math in grades 3 to 8. So we felt that there are a number of different preparations that are in place and trainings that are planned from DESE for districts. Those involve tutorials and practice tests, training regarding testing protocols, managing student rosters. The MCAS tests themselves are in flux and are being designed, and aspects of that redesign, including having students write to text in each grade level test for the ELA MCAS. All those things have not been communicated to districts yet, and we wanted to be part of those initial trainings on those aspects to have a very successful and smooth computer-based testing experience for grades 4 to 8 this year. And that was, we were required as a district to submit it, and we submitted our decision. And the Superintendent and the principals will be happy to entertain any further questions.
We did review our infrastructure, and the way the next generation MCAS works is you download it to a server, and your students write the test, and then you upload it. So we've had to upgrade our servers, which we knew we needed to do anyway. But what we really wanted to ensure when we went into testing this year, first of all, we want to make sure the platform that they're using is fail-proof. In other words, we want to make sure that the download process is efficient and accurate, and that we're not going to have situations where kids are getting cut out of the test, etc. So we wanted to just exercise caution on this first administration. The other challenge is testing intervals, because when you're testing a large number of students, it's not as, we don't have the devices to make it as efficient as paper-based testing. So we're going to have to extend the testing period to a certain degree, unless we want a one-on-one environment, which I'm pro one-on-one, but not just for a test. I'm not going to recommend as a superintendent that we have a one-on-one laptop program or device for every child in this district just so we can write an MCAS test. So those were the primary reasons for taking I guess a cautious approach to this year's administration. NWEA, we do entirely online, grades 2 to 8, but it's an adaptive test, and as a result, there's less restrictions in terms of how many kids write the test at one time. When you're administering the same test to a group of students, you want to put as many students on that test as possible to minimize potential bias of the results. So we feel good about excuse me, our decisions, and we're still looking into the bandwidth situation as well. I'm quite confident we're okay, but until we do this trial run with grades 4 and 8 to make sure that what we think is reality, we don't want to jump too far ahead.
And as I said before, and as the superintendent echoed in a different way, a main variable to be decided in crafting a testing schedule is the number of students that are going to be tested concurrently. With a paper-based test, you can test a full grade level in one test session. And we're just taking a look at how that would operate, and the number of students that would be tested concurrently with computer-based testing.
Can you clarify, you said 3 sessions for ELA at grades 3, 5, and 7?
Okay, right now, yes.
But that's 3 full grade sessions, so we're talking like if we do 1/3 of the class at a time, that's really 9 test sessions.
Yes, that's right.
That's why I wanted to clarify.
Yes.
There, so these number of sessions are separate from how we have to block.
How we
the
block
students.
out the time, and that is what the principals for those grade levels have to decide. So, for example, if you divide 8th grade into 2 cohorts, the first cohort would take, you'd have, like what you said, Darryl, 6 test sessions.
I mean, what's interesting, excuse me, when we ramp this up by 2019, we're going to have to be there. In essence, we're taking all the devices we have and taking them out of the classroom and using them for testing. So we're already using devices every day in our classrooms for learning. And it's going to be really interesting to try to find a balance between using the devices for testing and still trying to make sure that we continue on with our routines in our classrooms in terms of using them as a learning tool as well. And that's going to be a challenge for that
Because
testing.
we need to be sensitive, and I don't want to use everything as an excuse in terms of budget, but there is cost implication to this that we need to, in terms of I know we don't, we already know how many sort of Apple carts and Chromebook carts you have because we've approved them over the last couple of years, but we clearly see that's not enough to do
No, it's
both
not.
there. And we want to be sensitive that we're not going to make a test set just for testing, but we're going to probably need a couple hundred more devices, and there's budget implication of that over the next couple of years.
Well, there are major budget implications for districts throughout the state, and the states, it's districts that could not meet the minimal requirements had to petition and show why to the
But I'm
state.
just looking at it more, just from our perspective in terms of, our 5-year, technology budget plan is going to have to go up because of this.
Right.
But smartly go up, not blindly go up.
Right.
Here, and, but, because we're going to come into budget season in terms of looking at our projections soon here.
And it's not just we have X number of devices and we need Y, so we just, fill in the difference with buying new devices. It's our old devices, our current devices, not old devices, our current devices will become old devices. And if this is coming into effect in 2019, that's going to be something that we have to budget for every year. We might have a little more wear and tear on the devices, not from the testing, but we're going to need to have a higher standard of reliability, frankly. If you have a computer, if you have a Chromebook that doesn't work sometimes in an elementary school classroom, you want to get that up and running as quickly as possible, but there's not, the state's not looking down your nose as you do it.
And
But,
Chromebooks are locked out after, excuse me, a period of time, between 4 and 5 years, you can't access anything anymore. They're cheaper to use, and they're the preferred hardware in schools, but there's a limitation on their longevity. But when you look at the longevity of most computers, if you're getting 4 to 5 years out of them, when they're used extensively, you're doing well.
Yeah. So, that's what I think in terms of us being realistic, honest about our things. Like, if we're planning on life cycling a server, we shouldn't say in our budget that we got to do it because of MCAS. It's because it's at the end of life, and the normal thing is to life cycle it, there. And I think if we're upfront and forthcoming with, here's our regular technology infusion plan, and that will take care of X% of our testing needs here, and then there's a delta associated with it. I think it gives us more credibility in presenting what our delta cost would be with it. Because if the Chromebooks have to be life cycled after 4 years anyway, it's not because of MCAS we have to life cycle them.
No. The servers, I mean, it's a bit of both, because most of our data storage is via cloud. But when you're writing an MCAS exam, you have to download it to a server. You can't download it to a cloud. So, but we still have areas within our district that we're saving data on servers with as well. So,
You mean our servers?
yes.
So
For the service
I
program as well.
I applaud the fact that we're being deliberate in the process, and I would ask that we continue to be deliberate. I don't want us leading the pack, because the word I heard that jumped out at me was bias. I think what's going to happen is that the state is going to realize that trying to get everybody to get up to speed and give this test electronically isn't going to happen, and it's going to introduce bias to the results if they continue to insist that those of us who can do and those of us who can't don't have to. I mean, they're not going to tell the district that if they can't get all the computers in place to stop giving the MCAS. They're going to tell them, let them do it on paper. The other thing is that when you do it electronically, you're introducing bias, because as you said, if there is an interruption to a student in the test-taking environment, which inevitably there will be, whether it's a student or a classroom or a wing of a building, it will happen. How do you correct for that bias? Now you've already introduced bias, because instead of giving it concurrently to the whole sample size, you're going to give it a third at a time.
Oh,
That-
Mr. Stamp run trials. for
Yeah,
people.
exactly. I mean, that inherently introduces bias. I would like to see exactly what's going to happen, and it wouldn't shock me if the state has to slow down. So why would we get out in front? And the other thing to keep in mind is that the MCAS is not designed to test how smart your kids are. It's designed to test, are they achieving a certain level of, reaching a certain level of achievement that we think is important to have. If it was an adaptive test, you would have to say, well, we'll have to live with the biases, because the only way to make it truly adaptive is to do it electronically. That's the whole idea. The questions change as the student's going through the exam, but that's not what MCAS is for. I don't necessarily see the inherent benefit to doing it electronically, other than, yeah, the kids are going to do it eventually, but you know what? They're going to have plenty of chances to
Opportunities.
do electronic testing. If they don't do the MCAS that way, so what, okay? So I would just like us to continue. I think just be as deliberate as we can afford to be, and be cognizant of, if we have to get there, we'll get there, and I'm confident that we will have less problems getting there than many will, but there will be challenges that need to be met, both financially and in execution.
And we've talked about it in past meetings there, the fact that I just received my daughter's 10th grade MCAS scores has had no impact or benefit to me as a parent in terms of her course selection, improvements to her instruction over the last 6 months.
Right.
It was a check
does
the
what it
box for the
does.
state
Yeah.
test.
It's a limitation.
In that sense.
And there also may be a need, depending on what we find out when we test this year, to have more technology staff available if we went to full implementation as well. Because if you do have an issue, you need somebody there, and we hardly have any technology staff.
Yeah.
We were running, 1,500
It's-
devices in our district.
You might need
And,
electronic proctors, like
more people.
that can proctor the test on an electronic basis, not on a content basis or on a, how do I take the test basis? Okay, it's time to turn this page over. It's just to help us, hey, my thing's not working. All right, here you go, here's another one. We're gonna ask the teachers to do that? I mean, maybe if we have to, but I would rather not. Maybe there's ways to get around that, so. It'll be interesting. It's a brave new world.
I had a question before we move on. Dr. Jamian, does the information from the DESC suggest that there will be more time spent on testing under the new framework, or will it equal out to be about the same?
You mean the length of the length of the sessions versus what the test?
The length
The
of the
total
number.
length of time out of the school year, yes.
What they have done is they've put out an amended schedule.
That sounds like them.
And as I see the amended schedules, they've lengthened the test window and have it cover like 3 months in the spring, rather than going by the old testing window where you would have ELA right, very much
Yeah, I think that's the
earlier
question, though.
than
The question is-
that.
Is how much time are they gonna spend on the MCAS test?
Right, have they
Compared to how much they've
increased-
spent historically?
So
Oh.
what's the total test?
Individual
Oh,
student.
the total test, I think there is a little bit of, it's lengthened a little. It's about 200 minutes.
Okay, and currently,
Last year, I think it was 2 sessions.
Well, it's untimed, so
Right.
it's really just a
It's
ballpark.
apples and
There are
oranges.
students who take significantly longer.
Right.
In at least one subject, there's a third session. There was 2 sessions in ELA and 2 sessions in math for all grades except grade 4, back when we used to also do the long comp in grade 4. Last year, they did it a little bit differently and wove the writing in as a test. But in at least one subject, there's 3 sessions. So it may be lengthened.
It's
To
lengthened.
some degree, but I don't know if the length of the sessions are shorter as far as less questions and whatnot. So there'll be an additional day of testing in at least one subject, but it could be a shorter period.
I think we need to go through it this year.
And that was part of what we wanted to take a look at,
It's a really good question,
too.
and I would like to know the answer. And it's fine to, after we've gone through it, but can we think about that? Because we may have something to say about that.
and I'm sure, what DESC says today may not be
Exactly, things can
what
change.
the case is later on. And absolutely, we should give that kid who needs the time as much time and required to do it, but we would anyway, as much time as they need.
It's actually a change. Park
No,
was
that's a
timed,
change.
and there was talk that the new MCAS would be timed. So
That's right.
I think they made the right decision in leaving it untimed.
Yeah.
There was a lot of
For
teacher
what this
concern
is
about
supposed to
time
do?
management. Right.
Yeah, my
Well, no,
concern is
because-
the longer term impact is if every year you have to set aside an extra couple hours out of your classroom for testing than you had before for the class as a whole. If there's one kid in a room who has to take all day to do the test and, he or she is really working through it, that's fine, but if the whole day is spent for the whole class, that's a huge impact on learning.
Because this would go back towards where I think MASC should focus on is the time taken for compliance versus
Taken away from education.
taking away from education. And the more they lengthen this test to make it more, these other things here, we're eating into those minutes and hours.
And we would have the answer to those questions as we get more information and training on the testing sessions
Right.
and the scheduling.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, we're on to subcommittee reports, PMBC.
So I believe the paving is all complete
Yes,
at
Russell Street.
at the Russell Street
Yes,
School.
and it's all lined as
And
well.
it should be lined, and the track should be pretty close to being.
Track should be close to done, I would estimate, I don't know exactly, but probably within the week, I would think. It's been pretty, they should be pretty close.
Yeah, and then with the track replacement, we received 2 additional years of warranty on that. So,
One thing that is kind of an extension of this, I think that possibly at the next school committee meeting, I'd like to do a presentation on the alumni field project, because that will affect, that area of our school property. We're getting pretty close to having a final design to bring to town meeting to vote on and a cost associated with it. But some of the things that they're talking about are beyond the actual facility in the field itself. But there's some talk on the driveway and parking and things like that that I think would be good for us to hear and be updated on. And it also just gives another opportunity for a public forum to hear about what's going on with that.
Where are the buses going to go?
Really, we haven't talked about the buses. I don't think, based on the current structure, that they would have to go anywhere. Although we might decide that when there's events there, we might try to come up with a solution where they weren't there for the event, but on a non-event day, they might just very well be right where they are.
And we do move them for the big events.
Yeah, exactly, for the real big ones,
Right.
right.
I'm sorry, it's more of a tongue-in-cheek.
I appreciate that, but it is it's come up.
Yeah.
It's come up in the AFRAC meetings. It's definitely something. And they're all looking at me, and I'm looking at Steve, thinking, where's Steve? He's not here. And I'm like, okay, we'll figure it out. We can figure it out. We'll make it work. And we're not, right now, I haven't heard anybody asking us to make dramatic changes, like moving them away from that particular part of the campus or anything like that, so.
and then I sent you the drawing, it should be in your email.
All right, good,
there.
yeah, I'll take a look at that. Okay. All right, budget subcommittee?
The meeting tomorrow
Meeting
morning.
tomorrow morning.
That's what I thought.
First
Okay.
meeting.
All right, very good.
First meeting, just establish schedule.
Right. We have a joint meeting with the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen on Tuesday that Daryl is going to go to. I can't go to. I have to do an alumni field meeting. If you're around,
I cannot make it, that's what I say.
it's a kind of kickoff meeting. I don't even necessarily feel like you guys need to be there for that one. So Daryl will go and we'll come back and see if he'll tell us what.
Yeah,
he
if you
thinks.
have like your draft schedule or something out of your budget meeting,
Yeah,
or
okay,
something, that would be
sure.
good. Just like a
Maybe we'll talk
report
about
that,
that.
you know,
Yeah.
Yep, we'll establish that schedule tomorrow morning, and I can get that to you.
and then, because they'll probably want to figure out how we're going to dovetail into their calendar too, would be one of my guesses.
All right. I think that's it for now for Budget Subcommittee. Policy Subcommittee?
Nothing to report.
Okay. I don't think we need an executive session. We'll have the three of us tonight.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Oh, that was quick. All right. Second, all those in favor?
You just keep going on and on, Mike.
All right, thank you, everyone. We're back in 2 weeks with our next meeting right here. Thank you.